We're live.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Mercado. I'm New Florida Majority, and I'm here joined with Nancy Mateer, the Climate Justice Program Manager at New Florida Majority, Valencia Gunder, Director of the Smile Trust, and Adriana Rivera, the Communications Director for Alianza for Progress. And we're really coming together today to discuss the impacts of Hurricane Dorian, which just hit the Bahamas and really tragically impacted so many people's lives. Here in Florida, we're no stranger to hurricane crises and the impacts of the climate crisis. And have witnessed so many storms really devastate our neighbors in the Caribbean. And so today's really a moment for us to discuss the impacts of hurricane crises, disaster capitalism, which we've seen time and time again after a storm, the way that sets in and the interests of developers and private capital are put in front of the people. And we've seen that after Hurricane Katrina, after Hurricane Irma, after Hurricane Maria, and now a lot of concerns about the needs of the people in the Bahamas. And so, we're here to talk about community response and how people come together to respond to the wake of a crisis and to insist that governments serve the people. So if you want to receive hurricane alerts on your phone or information about how to join community relief efforts in Florida, you can text Hurricane FL to 90975. So I want to turn it over to our panelists and really ask you, what's a hurricane that's left a mark on you or on your life? And if you want to just introduce yourself with a brief story.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So I'll go ahead and kick us off. My name is Nancy Mateer, the Climate Justice Program Manager here at the New Florida Majority. And one hurricane that's left a mark on me is Hurricane Irma. At the wake, I'm going back to 2017 when I just started here at the organization, and myself, Valencia Gunder, and at the time, Maggie Fernandez, who was the chair of the Miami Climate Alliance, were sitting around, and Valencia Gunder's phone kept going off of folks really trying to figure out how they're going to prepare for this storm. And there and behold, Hurricane Irma came. These people were unavailable. They were unprepared. And then after the storm, the city did not do a very good job helping them recover in a way that was resilient and just. So our organization stepped in and created something called the Community Emergency Operations Center, which we will talk a little bit more of. And with that, we were able to make makeshift community hubs throughout Miami-Dade and South Broward to help assist individuals recover from Hurricane Irma. Folks were without lights for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. There was the death at the Hollywood elderly home. And then you had individuals who just could not make ends meet and could not get to where they needed to get the resources to sustain themselves. And so with that being said, we saw all these community organizations come together and help with the legal battle around SNAP benefits, around affordable housing and people being forcefully pushed away from their homes. And then we had the crisis around making sure that people can return to work. Folks weren't able to go back to work. They were falsely terminated. And then this created an issue for a lot of low income and marginalized communities throughout South Florida.
Thank you. Valencia, do you want to go next? You might be muted.
Sure. I'm Valencia Gunder, Executive Director and founder of the Smile Trust, and I'm also the Criminal Justice Program Manager at the New Florida Majority. Hurricane, I guess my story was started in '92 with Hurricane Andrew. I was fairly young, but I knew what was going on. At that time, nobody had seen a storm of that magnitude hit any part of America, and we received it. It was a Category 5. Storm surge was 19 feet. They had 5 tornadoes within the storm. In the eye of the storm hit Miami, specifically South Dade, which made people extremely vulnerable. I didn't understand vulnerability at the time, but my family went to volunteer in South Dade. I mean, we were without lights for 3 weeks ourselves. The water was contaminated. We were without gas. We had to pull together as a community to actually get the money to eat or food to eat. And I think seeing what was going on in South Dade, how houses were flat. And actually, September marked the 27-year anniversary of Hurricane Andrew. And it had, did Miami a number. It took us years. Some parts of the city still not even fully developed since Hurricane Andrew. And I think that's like my first memory of actually having to deal with the storm was Hurricane Andrew. In Miami, we have these things called Florida rooms. So usually that's the room in the house with a huge window, like a panoramic window. And that window, my grandmother didn't cover it for some strange reason. Thank God the windows didn't burst, but we saw things flying, like the hood of a person's car was flying across the windows, and it was really tough to see. And that was the actual short storm. I think Andrew was on Miami, 3 or 4 hours? And to see like Hurricane Irma, Maria, Matthew, and now Dorian sitting on cities 2 days, 3 days, that's something that we really need to take serious, because now hurricane preparation and response has to look different.
I echo that. If I could just chime in 1 second. One memory that I remember is fall 2005. This is a little selfish, but that was my senior year in high school, and Hurricane Wilma hit. And a lot of folks don't remember this, but Hurricane Wilma did a serious number in Broward County. I remember my homecoming was pushed back. Several other homecomings were pushed back, and we were out of school for about 3 weeks. And that was the longest I've been out of school. We didn't have any lights for 2 weeks. And I just remember us really figuring out, like, what is our next step? I've never been in that situation. V mentioned Hurricane Andrew 92. I was too young to remember that, but Hurricane Wilma was the exact memory that I remember, and other hurricanes before, because for some reason hurricanes want to come the week of my birthday. So every year my birthday is either pushed back or I can't celebrate because a hurricane is coming to South Florida.
Adriana, you want to go next?
Sure. So, I mean, being from Puerto Rico, I have a lot of hurricane memories and tropical storms and depressions and all of that. I guess my first memory was 1989, and my mom cannot believe that I can remember 1989 because I was 3 years old. And she was like, how can a 3-year-old remember? But I guess I was so impressed, and it was just so impactful that I do have live memories from Hurricane Hugo in 1989 when it went through Puerto Rico. And I remember we lived on the 3rd floor. It was an 18-story building, but we lived on the 3rd floor. And I remember the palm trees just swaying violently. And I remember my mom running with towels to put underneath the door so that the water wouldn't rush in from the hallway, because it was coming into the hallway. So that's my first memory when I was 3 years old. And even though I don't remember much, I do remember those 2 very specific things, the palm trees and the towels under the door. And then obviously, I mean, there's a lot more, but the biggest one, I guess, is Hurricane Maria, which was in 2017. We're 4 days away from the 2-year anniversary. And even though by that point I was part of the diaspora, I was here in Miami, it doesn't matter where in the world you were. If you're Puerto Rican, you definitely have some very vivid and impactful, sad memories. And I'm going to try to get through this as composed as I can, but it's definitely very difficult.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I remember moving to South Florida as a teenager right after Hurricane Andrew in '93, and just the devastation and so many people who lost everything. And, you know, we're here in a moment when, you know, people in the Bahamas, we are seeing those photos, we're seeing that reporting of families that have lost everything, have lost lives. And, you know, all three of you have become such important community leaders in responding to hurricanes and organizing communities to be prepared. I mean, Valencia, can you share a little bit the history of the community emergency operations centers and the work that you've been doing on the ground day after day here in South Florida in solidarity with the people of the Bahamas?
Sure. So Nancy brought it up a little bit earlier, some of the context behind the Community Emergency Operations Center. Just to be clear and fully transparent, I created the name because I wanted to take a jab at the county. So our emergency management in Miami is called the Emergency Operations Center, and we created the Community Emergency Operations Center. We wanted to create a safe space where all of our community can come and get assistance, legal assistance, food, first aid, especially for our undocumented brothers and sisters and returning citizens, because both of those populations were in fear that these larger institutions would not serve them. And we saw that happened before Hurricane Katrina and other storms. And just a few weeks before Hurricane Irma hit, we saw what was happening in Houston. So we decided that we wanted to create our own process. Before then, you know, being a part of different county boards and sitting in different rooms. For example, I sit on the executive committee for the 100 Resilient Cities for Miami, Florida, and they were not thinking about underserved communities. I mean, I was one of 3 women in the room. I was one of 4 Black people in the room of 40 people, and I was the only person in there chosen to represent underserved communities. Now, some people may think that's a good thing, but that's a bad thing because I was outnumbered in the fact that our community in Miami, 60% of our population is at poverty. And we are 80%, 75, 80% people of color. So I felt as if the room should look that way. So therefore the plans was not reflecting. I knew we were not ready for a storm of the magnitude of Irma. We had never seen a storm that big before. So I decided we were gonna do it. Nancy and Maggie were there and we jumped into it. We didn't have a lot to start off with. We planned it, 2 days before the storm? And we jumped out there and we were able to assist 18 communities in 2 counties in 23,000 residents after the storm within 6 days. It was all grassroots. We were learning as we were going, and it became an amazing thing. The fact that we knew our communities well enough, we knew community leaders, we were able to get out into the community. And when you fast forward to Hurricane Dorian, we had decided to activate the CEOCs, both Broward and Dade County, in the wake of finding out about Hurricane Dorian. We, they kept saying it was coming, then it wasn't coming, and it's coming, it's not coming. So we just fully activated. And then when the storm hit the Bahamas, we already had shops set up. So it was really easy for us to jump right into hurricane relief for the people of the Bahamas. What happened in the Bahamas hit me really hard because my family is Bahamian, and I was very concerned about their well-being. And then the fact that South Florida has such a huge Bahamian population. So just a little bit of history, it would be no Miami without the Bahamians. When they built the city, when they tried to build the city, they had to go to Bahamas and get Bahamians to come to Miami and literally build the city that we live in. So a lot of people wanted to respond, wanted to assist. And because of our trustful relationships with our community, we were able to get 157 pallets over to the Bahamas of supplies, sorted, counted everything within 6 days. It was hard work, and some of us are still tired, but we were able to respond working directly with nonprofit, with NGOs in the Bahamas, and also some churches to get stuff directly to the people. And it's disheartening to hear what's actually happening there. A lot of people don't know this, but the Bahamas is considered a third world country, not just because of its financial situation, but also its population. It's only 350,000 people, give or take, on the entire island. And that puts them in a very vulnerable situation. And then they have a huge Haitian population there also that was completely wiped out. We still don't even know the numbers of undocumented Haitians that may have lost their lives, that are misplaced, but we're still working closely with these organizations, and we're trying to see what long-term assistance look like for them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and really talking about the history and the special relationship between South Florida and the Bahamas, Valencia, and all of the inspiring work you did and have been doing. And I know that the work that was done and started thanks to your leadership in South Florida really inspired organizations across the state to set up community emergency operations centers, and led to some really successful litigation. Nancy, you mentioned the litigation and lawsuit around disaster SNAP, disaster food stamp benefits. Do you want to speak a little bit more to kind of what are some of the lessons learned for communities recovering from crises like these?
Yeah, so as soon as Hurricane Irma landed on us, that was the beginning of the month. And as we all know, that's when bills are due. And that's sometimes when all our SNAP benefits are released. And at this time, either folks received their benefits and were able to go and get the groceries they needed. But after the storm hit and no electricity was there, their food spoiled, or they couldn't replenish, and that was their entire stock for the month. And so organizations like Community Justice Project, New Florida Majority, Catalyst Miami, a few others came together and really filed a lawsuit in terms of ensuring that folks can get benefits, but in a just way. So when folks went to file for their benefits, they were standing in these long lines in disgusting conditions, unhumane conditions. I know folks who stood there for 14 hours in the hot sun with no covering and was said to be patient and wait your turn. And so with this lawsuit, what we were able to accomplish was that folks were able to file for their benefits online on the phone, sorry. And they were able to not wait in the long conditions. These are people who are the elderly, pregnant, disabled, who were treated in a way that they shouldn't have been treated in the beginning. So that was a win for us, making sure that people who did need those benefits were able to get them if they couldn't or could not stand in these long
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think the community organizing that really happened we saw it post Katrina, the incredible organizing in Louisiana. We definitely saw it in South Florida after Hurricane Irma. And Puerto Rico is definitely another example of communities really coming together when the government is not serving you, when the government is not there for its people. Adriana, can you tell us a little bit more about, the impact of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and particularly like what were the longer term needs, right? Because everyone turns their attention like right after a crisis, and then, kind of forget it, or it goes to the back of your mind and don't realize what a long road to recovery it really is.
Yeah, so just to piggyback right off of your last sentence about the long road to recovery, I mean, we're 4 days away from the second year anniversary of Hurricane Maria, and there are still 3,000 homes with blue tarps as roofs on the island. So, and that's 3,000 families that, aren't safe in their own home. When it rains, they relive it again. I can't imagine what they have been going through with these hurricane scares and, Dorian kind of coming and at the end kind of swerving, but what must have they been going through? It must have been so frightening for them. But then going back to your point about what the community does when the government isn't really stepping up, I think in Hurricane Maria's case, there's two different angles. I guess there's the diaspora, like what we did to step up for our folks back on the island. A lot of us knowing and having that little like voice in the back of our heads that says, are people really getting this? Are people really getting the aid that we're sending them? Because we knew, I mean, being from Puerto Rico, we knew what the agencies are like over there. And then knowing also FEMA under a Trump administration, we didn't have a lot of faith on them either. So a lot of the diaspora here tried to find other ways to get the aid over there. They had people rented private airplanes, private jets, private boats, and really kind of skirted the government officials to kind of get the aid really where it was going to. And on the island, people didn't wait. I mean, people didn't have the luxury really to wait for these government agencies to get to them, especially in the interior of the island and the areas away from the San Juan metro area. In Miami, I'm one of the few Puerto Ricans that I've actually met that aren't from the San Juan metro area. So personally, it hit me really hard when we were packing supplies over at Manal Wynwood at the big warehouse. And everybody, 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, had heard from their loved ones in Puerto Rico. And it took me 6 weeks to hear from my loved ones in Puerto Rico because I'm from the mountains. So the people in the mountains really don't have the luxury and knew not to expect and not to wait until the government officials came to them because, it could be forever. So you had people that, knew a little bit of electricity and climbed up the posts to get the electricity connected. There's actually some deaths that occurred that way from people being electrocuted trying to connect their own community's electricity. But, that's what they felt they had to do at the moment. And like that, there's a million other examples of things that people felt they had to do at that moment because they couldn't count on the government to do it for them.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. It's, I think it really points to the ways that community comes together to serve the needs of the people. And, I think Valencia, Nancy, you're really spearheading some efforts to collect an incredible amount of supplies to send to the Bahamas. And now, we know that many people are going to have to leave. And as Valencia mentioned, Bimini is only 50 miles off the coast of Florida. And we have a situation where a ferry that was headed to Florida, passengers were actually turned away because they didn't have US visas. Does anyone really want to speak to what can people do now to support the people of the Bahamas who are still in need of supplies and of goods, but also many of whom may need to leave the island given the conditions there?
Yeah, I'll chime in. As of September 10th, the Trump administration said that they will not be allocating TPS status to anybody who is here to relieve help or aid from recovery due to recovery efforts. And I'm encouraging people to continue to give to trusted organizations, to actually, if they can, to visit the Bahamas. There are other places in the Bahamas that you can still visit to help that economy, to generate economy so folks can come back safely and they can continue providing for the folks that still live there. Also, if you are in connection with anybody on the ground who's doing great work, please donate to them. These people are out there putting not only their lives at risk, but helping individuals who have lost everything. And also calling your local elected officials, your state elected officials, and your federal elected officials, just to tell them, listen, act now. Have Donald Trump resign, not resign, but retract what he says about TPS and really ensuring that, because this is not new to our government. And in the 1990s, the Honduras and Nicaragua, their individuals were given TPS status after Hurricane Mitch, 2015 in Nepal. After that disaster with the earthquake, folks were given TPS status. So why not for the Bahamians now in 2019?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the people of the Bahamas, most of them needed very temporary status. Like a lot of them only needed to get over here 60 days to get their lives back underway and go back to the Bahamas. I've yet to meet a Bahamian who's been here since the storm that wants to stay. They believe that their country is the better place to live anyway. So I don't understand why our government is not giving them temporary refuge like they're asking. But what I agree with what Nancy said, to continue to donate to organizations that are working with them. What's happening on the ground is, so what's happening in Abaco, they're doing a 100% evacuation of that island. So if anybody's telling you they're taking stuff into Abaco, it is not true. It's inhabitable at this point. They're going to do a 100% evacuation, and parts of Freeport are also being evacuated. So if you're going to continue to send supplies, send stuff over to Freeport, Eleuthera, or to Nassau. And if you look online, a lot of the organizations in the Bahamas are starting to set up, because they're now getting access to computers to set up their own donation sites and things of that nature. So feel free to do that. And then if you donate to organizations stateside, you want to make sure that they're trusted organizations that would get stuff over to the right people. In the Bahamas, they have this thing called NEMA. It's very similar to our FEMA. I just had a call this morning with an organizational leader, and what they're doing is charging these people money to get the stuff off of the docks. So people, they do need monetary donations. The stuff that we gathered and we sent to the Bahamas, we're going to take care of the financial obligations through us. But they are capitalizing off of this disaster. People are not getting the things that they should. Someone sent me a picture of the amount of stuff that Red Cross gave out over there for a family. It's not enough for even a child. So it's a real thing. They, some people are taking the stuff and filling up their own stores, and they're selling it to people for double the price. So it's a lot of things. I'm quite sure you all heard stories like this in Puerto Rico. Probably this happened in Louisiana, and I'm quite sure it happened in Haiti too after the storm. And we just have to be mindful that we're giving with a good heart, but be smart about how you're giving. That's the biggest thing. And then also know that this is long-term recovery. Like after these first 2 weeks, this is going to take them years to get their community back up and running, especially for those who lost everything, who lost all of their business, all of their homes. You want to make sure that you're looking into that. I know for us, we're going to shift into long-term recovery in about 2 weeks to assist with some other things that is needed. But it is something, and I beg of you, if you're listening and you want to see how you can help, continue to donate to the organizations that are trusted, that are really going to assist the people there, because they're going to need it 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So if you see a link up, don't think that the people of the Bahamas are okay. They're not going to be for a very long time.
If I can add to that, I think that if we learn two things about what happened in Puerto Rico, be one, that these kind of disasters bring out the best in people, but it also brings out the worst in people. And you have a lot of government officials taking for them and their family and their own, because they have access to this aid that gets to the islands first. You also have just people with that just don't have morals and just selling things like you just mentioned, So yes, be very aware of who you're sending money and aid to. And then the second thing that I would say is that unfortunately, we also saw this lack of aid, of humanitarian aid from this government in Puerto Rico as well, and we all know it. I definitely believe that if we weren't U.S. citizens, it would have been a really different story when all the Puerto Ricans came here. And one thing that definitely, speaks to that is the fact that when FEMA evacuates people in different states, they give them the temporary housing, but then they usually help them find more stable housing after the fact. What happened with the refugees in Puerto Rico was after their temporary housing vouchers were done, they were literally thrown into the street and said, good luck. So that speaks volumes right there.
So being that just mentioned, the temporary housing, you have a question on the chat someone would like to ask that were prompted here at New Florida Majority. And they said, great job. Are there any opportunity to assist on the ground in the Bahamas?
I can answer that. I know it's a few organizations that are sending people over, but these are trained professionals that they're sending. So usually, even like for us, we've been collecting stuff. We're not sending team members over yet because we don't know and understand or trained to do search and rescue. And that's what's happening there right now. They need to do a full assessment. Only organization that I know that has taken volunteers into the Bahamas is Third Wave Volunteers. Mm-hmm. But honestly, we are not really pushing for people to go to the Bahamas right this moment, especially when they're trying to get people off the islands, get people situated. You don't want to go and add to the trauma that's already there. You taking up a hotel room is adding trauma. You're eating food that somebody else can eat, drinking water, using anything. So that's, and I mean, when you're going into ground zero, now it is like Nancy said, other parts of the Bahamas that you can still go and visit and enjoy your vacation. But the ground zero parts right now, I'm not sure of any other orgs, and I wouldn't rush to get there at this moment because they're going to need help even around this time next year. So maybe that's when. For us, I'm not looking to push for any of us to go until maybe this time next month, even us, because I want to give the people of the Bahamas all of the space that they need and allow the professionals to get in there to, medical needs and the food right off and try to get some safety and order in place as much as possible to make sure people are okay.
Yeah. I also want to chime in real quickly that we're still in hurricane season, so I would keeping sure that their homes remains prepared, stocking up their things so that they're not put in a more vulnerable situation as well. So hurricane season ends November 30th. If y'all don't know, have a checklist ready, you can visit our site, the New Florida Majority. We have a list in 3 languages, Haitian Creole, Spanish, and English. And as Andrea mentioned in the beginning of the call, for any updates, you can text us at 9975 and hurricane.org for any information, and that's 90975.
Great. So as Nancy said, you can text Hurricane FL to 90975 if you want hurricane alerts on your phone or information about how to join community relief efforts. If you have any questions, feel free to submit them via the chat. I think one question I wanted to throw out to the panelists as well is, as scientists are sharing that we're likely to see more and more extreme weather events given the climate crisis, what does that mean for communities and, how do we organize and how do we prepare and what do we do given the fact that, this isn't going to be every every 20 years, but we're likely to experience many more climate disasters and other extreme weather events.
I guess I'll start. So what this means for us now, especially as climate justice advocates and environmental justice advocates, that it's only going to get worse. We've been saying for a long time that climate change is real. This is what happens when you do not pay attention and actually plan and implement things to make sure that we are prepared for these new things. To see a storm go to 0 miles per hour blew my mind. I have never seen a storm do that before. These superstorms, like if y'all looked at the size of Dorian, he was big as our entire state. Like these are humongous storms that are taking their time when they get to us. They're sucking beaches dry. They're flooding other nations. Like it's a real thing. So what it means for me now is to reevaluate what we look at and what we say hurricane preparedness is. So one of the main things we teach people is to have 2 days worth of food. But what is 2 days worth of food when the storm is on you for almost 3 days? What is that? What is our advocacy has to change. We have to start putting pressure on our government. You all cannot wait 42 or 72 hours to respond to communities when the storm is sitting on people for 2 days. You just can't do that anymore. We have to look at weatherization. I know people talk about going green and all of that stuff. Impact windows only take up, 150 miles per hour of wind? Hurricane Dorian was 202. So like when we talk about preparation and we talk about surviving, I think we need to have a deeper conversation of what that looks like. The Bahamas is known to build to code. I was listening to NPR. They said that the Bahamas is one of the nations that actually built to code. So if the buildings in the Bahamas could not handle the storm, that means America has something to deal with. I want everybody to know, like, we were only a few miles away from being in full devastation ourselves. We have to have deeper conversations, reevaluate what it is that we need going into these storms, how we prepare. I was telling a good friend of mine, like, I get fully dressed during a hurricane. I'm fully dressed with rain boots by the door. And people may think that's a joke, but I'm quite sure the people in Katrina would have probably thought that was a good idea. The people in Puerto Rico think that's a good idea. And I'm more than sure the Haitian and Bahamian community thinks that's a good idea. We have to take this stuff serious. And one thing about hurricanes, it doesn't care about your race, your class, your language, your education, none of that. We all are affected, and it's a real thing. We don't care what the people in DC are saying, if it's real or not. We know it's real. We feel it. We see it. Our families are dealing with this every single day. And I think that we just need to be a little bit more aggressive when we are pushing legislation or when we having conversations with legislators. And even when we're talking to our community, this is not a thing that you just, when hurricane come in, I go prepare for it. Not with these type of storms. This needs to be a year-round preparation at all times, that we're prepared for storms, because these things look different at this point. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately in the past few days. Just what do I tell my community? Like, how do we prepare our communities now? And as of right now, in full transparency, not even Valencia is ready. But I will get there for sure.
What I would add to that is that we definitely need to push harder when we're talking to our elected officials about climate change, because like Valencia said, I mean, the conversation around even preparedness is changing, because now you need to be prepared for a storm that may be on you for more than 1 or 2 days. So also the way that these storms now are impacting our land, like the way that our land is set up, our beaches, but we use Puerto Rico is an archipelago, so it's an island chain, just like the Bahamas is. There was an island called Palominito, and it no longer exists. So Maria, like, erased that island from the face of the earth. It, you know, sucked it back into the ocean. And we're seeing this, we're seeing erosions in beaches that are, you know, incredible. And it looks like the day after tomorrow. And with Dorian, people in Scandinavia felt the winds from Dorian. So let me say that again. People in Scandinavia felt winds from a tropical hurricane. Like, that blows your mind. So not only do people that commonly would get hit by these storms, like, you know, the Caribbean, Florida, the East Coast, but everybody now has to worry about natural phenomenon that usually may not have impacted you. And now with climate change, maybe it will. So hurricane advocacy, now we have to tell people in Maine, in Canada, Dorian hit Canada. That's crazy. And then, you know, I want to say one last thing that I want to say was that, for example, for Puerto Rico, we're 3.2 million on the island, but we can't vote. We don't have representation in Congress. So we really need all of the voices, not only of the Puerto Ricans here, but of everyone, all of you, to be our voice in Congress and in the House legislature and state legislature, because, you know, it's going to keep affecting us, and the people on the island have no way to really get their voice out with this federal government. So we really need everyone to advocate for the people on the island.
Thank you, Adriana. Nancy, any final remarks?
Yes, my final remark would be, if anybody can push for a policy ask, it would be to push for 100%.
Welcome to the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport.
Our climate change is because of our dependency on fossil fuels. Now, if our government can transition into 100% renewable energy, our communities of color and marginalized communities will not be dealing with respiratory issues because of the high heat index, which we're facing now currently in South Florida, the wildfires, the severe weather, hurricanes, and then climate migration. As these storms continue to become more and more severe and land masses continue to disappear, people are going to migrate. Now we have to talk about resources, we have to talk about economy, and we have to talk about our overall livelihoods. Do we have enough resources to go around to sustain all these people who are coming in to other parts of the world? And that is one of the biggest problems that we're seeing now, which is climate migration. So I'm again, hurricane season does not end because Dorian has passed us. We are here till November 30th, trying to ensure that our communities are prepared, that they're doing the best that they can to be more and more resilient.
Thank you so much for that, Nancy, Adriana, Valencia, for all of your leadership and everything you do. We are truly interdependent, and in the face of this global crisis, the ways that communities are coming together to defend one another, to protect one another, to serve one another, is a real example, I think, for of solidarity, of interdependence and community. So appreciative of all of your organizing and your leadership. And for those watching, if you want to receive hurricane alerts on your phone and information about how to join community relief efforts here in South Florida, text Hurricane FL to 90975. Again, that's Hurricane FL to 90975. Thanks to the hundreds of volunteers and thousands of supporters who gave their resources, their time, their energy to help South Florida be prepared and around the state to help with hurricane preparedness efforts, but then also really showed up in solidarity with the people of the Bahamas and continue to advocate for our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico, all over the Caribbean, all over the state and the nation, and to push for that just transition that we all know that we really need. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.